नेटवर्क चेंज हुआ है, मेरे शायद फिर से करके पूरा कनेक्शन तो नहीं बनाना पड़ेगा। अभी
अभी आया नहीं आएगा।
नहीं ये वाला चैनल है ना।
हाँ चैनल तो यही है।
वो क्या नाम है?
ये है ना सेमिनार हॉल।
नहीं ये नहीं है
फिर
दूसरा
ये मल्टीपर्पज है।
लाइव में जाओ।
ये तो नीचे वाला है।
नहीं एक और है चैनल कौन सा लाइव है विदाउट 2024 वाला
कौन सा?
ये पुरानी फोटो
एक ही लाइव। तुमने टाइटल क्या डाला है?
ये डाला
IMHF सेमिनार हॉल डिवाइड। ये रहा
ऑल डे
ये है मुझे
हाँ ये आपका मोबाइल में आ भी रहा है।
सिग्नल तो आ रहा है बाकी
मेरे को जरा दिखा
नीचे वाला आ रहा है
मैं अपने मोबाइल डेटा पे देखता हूँ।
किस चैनल नाम से?
ये सब नहीं बस हो रहा
I agree with what you said because when we were part of a project for Peninsula School, so there was a lot of segments there, and what you said about the helicopter and the Meghna Chandraghat exactly. So this was a big thing. I found it, as a not part of the armed forces, for me this was a big revelation. The airlift happened, how it happened in the
सवाल पूछते कि हाथ का देखा ही नहीं
No, and this whole idea of jointness was actually on the ground, like the helicopters.
Yes, yes, correct.
Everything happened together.
Yes,
Sangat, of course. All the workers.
complete coordination.
Disobeyed order. They saw an opportunity. They troubled. Two troubled Rajasthan, not rather than. I don't know. Yeah. Function as the youth side. I remember hearing this film that was made about how little tiny things were there that me when she was first coming to one tiny one residence building in Mumbai.
think that year, if you go, there was a master plan. I remember the war started. He's so total
क्या खाना इधर अच्छा अभी कनेक्ट भी कर दिया ठीक है लाइव कैसे करते नेटवर्क की
actual experience of
ये वाली सीट हटा देंगे तो यहाँ का पॉकेट
Thank you. at बड़ी stage कि इतना time लगा रहे हैं
जब तक उनको यूट्यूब पे कुछ और दिखाते थे, इसने जो भी वीडियोस बनाई है ना, वी कैन प्ले दोस. अच्छी सी वीडियो देख रहा है. And my name is Ashwini Singh Dutt, and informally people call me Ash. So from what I've been told, that comes from like yes, that.
मेरी मेमोरी तो नहीं भरेगी ना कुछ, क्योंकि तो लाइव चल रहा है, रिकॉर्ड होना हो रहा है, रिकॉर्डिंग
नीचे खड़े हैं अभी.
गए खड़े रहेंगे क्या बेचारे?
नहीं
एक घंटे से
नहीं, इनका अच्छा सा कोई शॉट लिया हुआ है.
अरे लिए हैं बहुत सारे,
कौन सा शॉट हम दिखा सकते हैं?
बहुत सारे इनके.
ये दिखा, इसके में कुछ दिखा कोई ना, एक ऐसा चाहिए जो क्लीन शॉट हो जिसमें से
बहुत सारे अब ढूंढने पड़ेंगे, बहुत सारे.
हाँ वही देखना पड़ेगा, हम देख रहे हैं, हमारे पास टाइम है. ये वाला सीन दिखा सकते हैं, ये शॉट सही है. 2855.
ठीक है ना?
हाँ हाँ वही मैं कह रहा हूँ, ये तो अभी मैं लाइव पे दिखा रहा हूँ.
सही है.
बीच बीच में कुछ सीन ऐड कर.
Jai Hind, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Director General USI, I, Commander Bhavna Salaria, extends a warm welcome to each one of you present here to the second edition of the Indian Military Heritage Festival. This festival not only aims to honor the sacrifices of defense personnel and preserve the country's military heritage, but also to educate future leaders on national security and inspire the youth by showcasing the bravery and the important role played by the armed forces. Our first session today brings together renowned experts in the fields of multilateralism and peacekeeping. The ever-changing nature of global conflicts poses new challenges to multilateralism and peacekeeping. Witnessing the current situation in Ukraine and Gaza, this could not be more relevant and thus merits a greater examination. Our panelists shall focus on a particular challenge impacting world peace and cooperation. This session aims to explore how these challenges intersect and what solutions could emerge. I feel honored to introduce our panelists with all of you. May I request Lieutenant General Dr. Rakesh Sharma, Param Vishist Seva Medal, Uttam Youth Seva Medal, Ati Vishist Seva Medal, Vishist Seva Medal to please come up on the stage. General Sharma was commissioned in Gorkha Rifles in 1977 and had a career spanning 40 years in the army. He has had extensive operational experiences in Jammu and Kashmir, Northeast and on the western borders. The officer had trained the Botswana Army for 3 years in Africa and attended the National War College at Abuja, Nigeria. He has done PhD in Defense Studies. General Rakesh Sharma commanded the Fire and Fury Corps in Ladakh, responsible for Kargil, Siachen Glacier and Eastern Ladakh, facing both Pakistan and China. The general was the Adjutant General of the Indian Army, responsible for the human resource management and superannuated in 2017. He is currently Distinguished Fellow with Vivekanand International Foundation, Center for Land Warfare Studies, and on the Executive Council of Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, and of Global Counterterrorism Council. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Ashok Mukherjee, Indian Foreign Services. Ambassador Ashok Mukherjee's diplomatic career spans 37 years from 1978 to 2015. As India's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations in New York, he oversaw India's negotiation on Agenda 2030 on sustainable development, focusing on prioritizing the use of technology for achieving the SDGs. He represented India in the intergovernmental negotiations that recommended a text-based outcome for UN Security Council reforms in September 2015. Ambassador Mukherjee chaired a multi-stakeholder working group under India's National Security Council Secretariat to recommend cyber norms for India. He has addressed audience at seminars and conferences in India and abroad, including the Global Conference on Cyberspace at London and New Delhi. Ambassador Mukherjee has published articles and book chapters in Indian and foreign publications on India's foreign policy, as well as several books. He obtained a BA Honours and MA degree from St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi. In July 2018, he was awarded a Doctor of Civil Law degree by the University of East Anglia, UK, for his contributions to diplomacy. We shall be having a video message from Mr. Shombi Shah. Mr. Shombi Shah, a national of the United States of America, is the UN Resident Coordinator for India since November 2021. Mr. Shah has devoted more than 25 years of his career to promoting inclusive and sustainable development internationally, bringing experience he has acquired at the United Nations and externally to the new position. Within the organization, he most recently served as United Nations Resident Coordinator in Armenia after holding several leadership positions at the United Nations Development Program, where he was Resident Representative in Armenia, Deputy Resident Representative in Georgia, Deputy Country Director in Lebanon, Regional HIV/AIDS Practice Team Leader for UNDP Europe, and the Commonwealth of Independent States in the Russian Federation, Program Manager for the Western Balkans in New York, and Assistant Resident Representative in the Russian Federation. Now, I would like to call upon the moderator for this panel discussion, Major General B.K. Sharma, Ati Vishesh Seva Medal, Sena Medal and Bar, Director General USI. Major General B.K. Sharma is the Director of United Service Institution of India, India's oldest think tank, established by the British in 1870. He was conferred 3 military awards by the President of India for rendering exceptional distinguished national service and for displaying exceptional courage. He was commissioned in the 6th Light Infantry Regiment in 1976 and superannuated in 2012. He specializes in strategic net assessment methodology, scenario building, and strategic gaming. He has visited about 35 countries as member of international delegations and on educational tours. He has participated in 29 international conferences abroad and several such conferences in India. He has edited about 8 books, contributed more than 60 seminal papers in the Indian and foreign journals and newspapers, and presented 30 research papers at international conferences. He edits the prestigious USI strategic book. Before we commence the discussion, I request all of you to please stand for the group photograph.
Yes, sir. Sir, this side. Sir, this side. Hello, sir. Thank you, sir.
मुझे साइड से खींचिए
A very warm welcome to the co-panelists who've been introduced and to the audience here, particularly the young students who would be looking forward to very as sort of first bright futures in maybe in the United Nations, armed forces and in different international organizations. Therefore, our purpose here would be to keep our discussion extremely simple so that you can understand the essence of it. And before we commence with the proceedings, we could request you to play the special message from UN Special Representative.
Can we have the video, please?
Namaste, and warm greetings to all gathered for the Indian Military Heritage Festival 2024. Mujhe afsos hai ki main aaj nahi aa saka. I wish I could be there with you in person. As the UN Resident Coordinator in India, I am deeply honored to address this celebration that bridges India's historic military traditions with its modern-day commitment to global peace. For over 76 years, UN peacekeeping has been transforming lives around the world. More than 2 million women and men from 124 countries have served in 71 peacekeeping operations. Today, India, which has provided more men and women for UN peacekeeping than any other country since the beginning, stands as one of our strongest partners, with more than 6,000 Indian peacekeepers, including 142 women, bringing hope to conflict-affected regions worldwide. And last year, I had the great honor to represent the United Nations in receiving 150 Indian-made, top-quality armored personnel carriers for peacekeeping service in South Sudan, an excellent example of Make in India. India has also shown remarkable leadership in gender-responsive peacekeeping. From deploying the UN's first ever all-women police unit in Liberia, to recently deploying an all-women platoon specializing in community outreach in Abyei, India has led the way. This year, on Peacekeepers Day, the UN was proud to honor Major Radhika Sen with the Military Gender Advocate of the Year award for her work with MONUSCO in the DRC. However, peacekeeping service sometimes comes at a great cost. More than 4,300 peacekeepers have been killed in the line of duty since the beginning, and 179 Indian heroes, more than any other country, have given their lives in the name of peace. Just this year, Naik Dhananjay Kumar Singh was killed while serving in Congo, and his family received the Dag Hammarskjöld Medal, which is given to fallen peacekeepers. We extend our deepest condolences and solemn gratitude to the government and people of India, and especially to the families of the fallen peacekeepers. Colleagues, today, peacekeeping environment is more challenging than ever. Our blue helmets confront not just conventional forces, but also terrorists, criminals, and armed groups with modern weapons. They face new threats like digital warfare, hate speech, and disinformation. And old threats have reemerged. I first had the privilege to work with UN peacekeepers during my time in Lebanon a decade ago, when the first battalion I engaged with was the Indian battalion of UNIFIL. Yet now, today, with conflict raging in the Middle East, UNIFIL has come under attack. I joined the UN Secretary General, the UN Security Council, and the government of India in reiterating the paramount obligation to respect the safety and security of UNIFIL personnel and premises, and all UN peacekeepers. Despite these challenges, UN peacekeeping perseveres, and that with limited resources. The entire global budget is just half of 1% of world military spending. And because these conflicts are raging, peacekeeping is needed more than ever. But in order for our peacekeepers to respond to the challenges of today and tomorrow, they need the world's full support. As the Secretary General has said, achieving peace takes hard work. Let's recommit to supporting those who work for peace, UN peacekeepers. And to India, which has demonstrated such steadfast leadership for international peace and security, we are thankful. Hum Bharat ko dil se dhanyavad kehte hain.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we all know here that war and peace will always go hand in hand. There are three predominant narratives here. You have the hawks in this world who are itching for war. Then there are peaceniks who talk about non-violence and things like that. And there are people in between who are dabbling with the realities of life. And I'm tempted to quote Lee Kuan Yew, the founder of Singapore, when he said that social Darwinism is a part of nation's state behavior, right? So survival of the fittest, this kind of a balance of power and jostling for influence will always remain, and war is one manifestation and one instrument to achieve that. But what has happened that when the UN Charter was prepared in 1945, at that time it was mostly related to state versus state kind of conflicts. Today the very nature and character of warfare is changing. There is a debate how the nature of warfare is changing by virtue of technology. That's a debate by itself. But definitely the character of warfare is changing. In respect to now multi-domain warfare, you have hybrid war, you have asymmetric war, you have non-state actors, you have disruptive technologies coming in, you have lethal autonomous weapon system, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all kinds of new strategic frontiers are emerging: cyber, outer space, information space, cognitive domain, and civil wars, right? So this is the kind of a milieu in which that UN Charter has to be viewed and revisited. Now, we know that it is not only one odd nation or group of nations which will be able to bring out sustained peace. Multilateralism is the essence of, it's a collective responsibility of the international community. But at this juncture, when the multilateralism is needed not only between the states, but between the society and the states, and many other organizations like NGOs, regional organizations, it is required. But everything is in a state of flux. You are today working in a contested world order where the great powers who are supposed to be the custodians of global peace are at loggerheads and the very perpetuators of this conflict. So this is the biggest challenge that we are facing. So we would have a little bit of a question answer session to begin with, and first thing I will request General Sharma, who's extensively been writing and has got a lot of operations experience, to just map for us very briefly what are the trends in this warfare and how the landscape of warfare is changing. So about 7-8 minutes, General Sharma, over to you.
Can you hear me? So thank you, sir, for inviting me. It's a great honor to be invited to this festival second time in a row. It's a great occasion and a very excellently organized event, and my compliments to the DG and to everybody involved in this event. And thank you for the generous introduction. Now, I have a simple role to perform as to crystal gaze as to what's happening in the warfare, and I will not go into AI and missiles and those weapon systems which I don't think are necessary, and do broadly as to what I think is happening. So as January 2024 commenced, Uppsala Conflict Data Program and the Armed Conflict Location and Even Data Project said 32 countries are at war. In this year, today, 32 countries are at war, with 10 countries have extreme violence and 22 countries have very high violence. That's about a significant percentage of countries in the world which are at war. War has got a long shadow on global affairs today. But let me also put it here, the wars are messy affairs. Political end games and political and military end games, what politicians decide, are very difficult to achieve. escalation and conflict resolution is little absent, I would say, today. The mechanisms are failing. Victory is a nebulous concept. In any case, operational and tactical victories do not lead to lasting peace, which is the aim of should be the aim of a war. So actually, strategic aims are not achieved, even if there is some kind of operational aim to achieve. In a survey carried out earlier this year by Ipsos, they surmised that 84% from 30 countries believe that the world is in a more dangerous place than we were earlier for a very long time. And this poll was conducted prior to 7th of October last year, just prior to the Gaza war becoming. So that's the state of affairs of what the belief of people is there. Second issue,
750.
what is war and what is conflict?
750.
You know, this subject of war itself needs a redefinition. We got stuck into definitions of war laid down by philosophers and historians, which are less and less relevant here. Today, economic coercion is war. If what the Chinese did to Australia in the course of last 3-4 years can be counted war. The Australians have signed an FTA with the Chinese on all issues of trade, including barley, sorghum, beer, wines, students. In 2022, Chinese said, okay, we don't recognize it. 200% tariff on everything that the Australians want to sell. Australia lost nearly $50 billion in the course of 2 years. Before this year, they went across and said, sorry, and they said we will re-sign all our criticism on COVID, etc. And Australians went backwards, and the Chinese are open. So this is coercion. Economic coercion of the highest kind that is going across in the world is as important as a physical war is. And I can count hundreds of instances of economic coercion going on in the world today, and similarly military and political coercion. Military coercion, you know, South China Sea, Taiwan, line of actual control, which is all as part of ongoing things. My third point the wars are prolonged. They were urban affairs. There is no distinction between competence and non-competence. There is no rationality called proportionate force used by military forces. There is no rationality of civilian death. Look at the urban wars that have happened in the course of last 20 years. Mosul, Fallujah, Raqqa, in Georgia, in Mariupol recently, in Gaza, what is happening? In Gaza, the United Nations says it will take $100 billion and 14 years to just clear the rubble. Not rebuilding, just remove the rubble away. That's the kind of urban wars. And the number of civilians who are dying is astronomical. I mean, you just can't count. So there is a kind of democratization of violence happening. Everybody who has a weapon of any one kind, you know, we used to talk about sea denials and sea whatever. Nowadays, Houthis have got sea denial in Red Sea. 14 navies are fighting Houthis, and Houthis have got the whole sea litter. The Ukrainians without a navy has caused so much of damage in the Red Sea to the Russian fleet. So there is a democratization of violence. Civilian wars civilian deaths are as a routine. A fourth point. 2023 and ICRC came with a report which said estimated 195 million people live in areas in full or fluid control of armed groups or non-state actors. That's 195 million people living without a government. This is what ICRC report says. There are 450 armed groups all over the world which are of humanitarian concern. 36% of all these are in Africa, and Middle East has got 28%. That's what the ICRC report said at the beginning of this year. I'm just quoting ICRC report. This says half of Africa is controlled by armed groups. Where is the peacekeeping got to start in such kind of situation? De facto governments paid by many of these rebels impose taxes, they enforce security measures, they give dispute resolution, they also provide justice, even healthcare, education, public. These are rebel groups being provided. I'll also add that this is also an issue of resource wars, where, like for example, you know, the UN peacekeeping operations are on for a long time in DRC, but DRC has got cobalt, it's got gold, it's got oil, it's got minerals, and then there are corporations of this kind which are making advantage of what is available in DRC. It suits them to continue the wars of this kind. Time over to Tadana, sir, and take over half an hour. I have one more issue. It's the non-state actors who are civilized which matter as much. Non-state actors, we talk about Dastre Toiba, Boko Haram, and all the non-state actors of the type that we normally refer to, and they are the ones who are leading to wars. But they are non-state actors who are the civilized kind, which are as dangerous as the non-state actors which are non-civilized. Look at the statements made by the major corporations in the United States in the last 2-3 years. And I'll quote it here: Lockheed Martin, BAE Systems, Raytheon, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics. The CEO of the BAE Systems, Charles Woodburn, said last year, beginning of last year, we see opportunities to further enhance the outlook of the threatened environment. What he's wanting to say is, okay, my share market has gone up. This threatened environment is good for me. So did Gregory Hayes, of the CEO, Raytheon, said, I fully expect we are going to benefit from all this that's happening. These are the corporations that have reaping the benefits of the ongoing wars and ongoing civil wars going on simultaneously. That is the kind of situation that has been developing across the world. And if we say 32 odd countries at a war, this is an era of warfare and not an era of peace, as it seems. Now, it's apparent that the intrastate conflicts have taken a dangerous turn towards authoritarianism, and there is use of violence of give and take type. I end by saying a few words about the United Nations, and you know, 2/3 of the missions the United Nations took from 1945 were successful missions. They did a fantastic job in bringing peace across in the world, even building peace, peace enforcement, all the chapters 6, 7, and 6.5 and whatever, they did a fantastic amount of job. But of late there is need for change because the mandates have become weak. The troop contributing countries are weaker or unable to provide the right kind of wherewithal. That is why if the defense minister of Israel says that Secretary General Anthony Guterres is a persona non grata for Israel, I think that could be greatly insulting to the Secretary General's office. And this was said just about last month ago. All the United Nations General Assembly resolutions and Security Council resolutions on Ukraine and Russia, also on Israel and Gaza, seeking peaceful resolution or ceasefires, have not found acceptability across in measure. And many of these missions, in the course of last 2 years, many of these countries have pushed out UN missions out of their countries. Mali said, we do not want a UN mission. So UN, please withdraw it. The UN mission has been withdrawn, and the Wagner group has occupied the areas located by the United Nations mission in Mali. So what did Congo say? DRC. It said last year that we wish the UN mission in DRC be wound up, and please allow our own country to settle our own affairs, as you have not been able to protect the civilian deaths. This was said by the president of DRC last year. There is a trend building here where because of inability to provide civilian security, the governments in force are now increasingly asking the countries to, the United Nations to withdraw their forces. If it's two, it will catch on in time to come. Look what's happening to UNIFIL right now. I'm finishing, yes, sir. I know you will go. UNIFIL is, the Israelis already told UNIFIL to sidestep sideways. And a very nice article came out the other day in Sunday Guardian on UNIFIL. The fact of the matter is that there are problems occurring on even the existing missions which the United Nations is doing, and that they need to redevelop themselves into the present day challenges which are existing on the security front. Otherwise, there is just spreading. I end by saying that I personally am not in this manner so optimistic. The era is of jiski lathi uski bhains. Whoever has a stick will take the buffalo home. So if your mood is not right today, Iran turns on one side and fires missiles against Pakistan. And Pakistan turns back and fires missiles against Iran. And Iran doesn't like it, it fires missiles against Kurds in north of Iraq and also against Syria. And you target people and destroy targets inside Iran, what Israel has done. So this is supper night. Jiski lathi uski bhains. Just hit who we want to hit. This is the era existing today. Now here we have to take a clean slate and start thinking how can we push the issue of peace and tranquility, which was the basis of why United Nations was made. Your side.
Thank you. Thank you, Jan Sharma. I think you'll agree with me, Jan Sharma, besides being a very good thinker, is also endowed with what you call is the innocent Gurkha, humor. And on the other side, I'm from Sikh Light Infantry, so I actually symbolize what you call is crudeness, which is not manifesting as yet. So, but now you see, points that he has just elaborated, I'd like to add 3 more dimensions to it before we request Ambassador Mukherjee. What is this piece all about is right to life and dignified human existence. We talk about it. It's not all about wars, preventing wars. Now what has happened, in addition to the wars or the conflicts, there are other non-traditional security threats which are staring us in the eyes. You have climate change, and that creates catastrophic conditions which further aggravate, conflicts. Then you have this, very recently you saw COVID pandemic, right? Again, rightfully, the UN should have stepped in, but it was not in its charter, and there was nobody in control. And the third Frankenstein monster which is going to emerge is these disruptive technologies. There is an unbridled race for supremacy in terms of artificial intelligence, and the moment it falls in wrong hands and it becomes a tool of commercialization over commercialization, or a tool of strategic coercion, it will have its catastrophic effect on peace and stability. Now the question here is that firstly we would like to hear from Ambassador Mukherjee that this UN Charter, which has essentially 3 important clauses, Chapter 6, 7 and to an extent Chapter 8, right? What is the efficacy of the UN Charter in regard to the landscape which General Sharma has defined? And what are the challenges to multilateralism that you perceive? And Ambassador Mukherjee has been a very dynamic permanent representative of India at the UN, and has been always writing and promoting the need for reforms in the UN General Assembly and Security Council. Over to you, Ambassador Mukherjee.
Thank you. Thank you, General Sharma. Really nice to have listened to General Rakesh Sharma's remarks. Welcome to all of you. I feel very privileged to be asked to join you today in a function which has come out of the United Service Institution of India because in 2010 and 11, when I was handling the Ministry of External Affairs Policy, Planning and Foreign Policy Reviews, the idea came to us that we should involve the United Service Institution of India in a major international project. And that project was how to commemorate the Indian contribution to the First World War. Now, many of you who are members of USI and many of you in the audience would have seen 4 years of activity which actually got a huge boost because from 2014 the government decided to adopt the activities of the commemoration project and make them part of the visits of our Prime Minister to countries like Australia, to France, and visit the memorials where the Indian soldiers had fought and were commemorated, their names were there. So this illustrated to me the linkage between wars and foreign policy. And in terms of what General B.K. Sharma just asked me, I think I would have to sort of recall that the first outcome of the contribution of the Indian troops, the Indian military, the Indian armed forces to diplomacy came about in 1919 when India signed the Treaty of Versailles that brought the First World War to an end. And even till today, people point to this as a legal anomaly. How could a country which was a colony or a collection of princely states sign an international treaty? It had never happened before, and yet it did. And Maharaja Sir Ganga Singh Ji of Bikaner is a signatory of the Treaty of Versailles, and India became a founder member of the League of Nations. So the link between armed force and diplomacy has been there, and the key provision of the League of Nations, which was provided by President Woodrow Wilson of the United States, was the principle of international cooperation. So it was a conscious effort to move away from the concept which General Sharma just referred to of jiski lathi uski bhais, or whatever you said. This was the counter to that. The counter was international cooperation. Now, for different historical reasons, and we don't have time to go into all that, but that experiment failed. The Second World War happened. The only lesson that should have been drawn was that the big powers did not fulfill their obligations to resolve their disputes by dialogue, but they resorted to force, invasion, occupation. Japan invaded China in 1931. Italy, another permanent member of the League of Nations, invaded Abyssinia, Ethiopia, 1935. And soon thereafter, Germany took this example and started invading various countries in Europe, and so on, and the Second World War broke out. So again, and this is something that is again interesting for our younger generation, it was the Indian soldiers who volunteered to fight again to assert the primacy of international cooperation over this might is right. And 2.5 million Indian soldiers volunteered in the Second World War, fighting across the globe, and contributed to the victory of the Allies, which resulted again in an institution for international cooperation, which was the United Nations. So the role that we play in our country is not a role that is given to us by somebody like crumbs from a table. It's a role to which we have contributed through our blood, through our efforts, through our finances, and therefore we are an equal stakeholder, an equal participant in the way the world is evolving today. I think that's important to recall, because most people assume that, you know, these are former colonies, developing countries, and they are wanting something, and we should, out of the goodness of our hearts or the largest of our business interests, give them something. It is not. It belongs to us. It is ours as much as it is theirs. And I think that this is something that is a message that I think a conference like this actually helps us to focus on. Now, in terms of the UN Charter, 1945, when the UN Charter was being negotiated, most people today are quite shocked to hear that the invitation to the 46 countries to meet in San Francisco between April 1945 and June 1945 to discuss and negotiate the UN Charter was made on one condition. And that condition was in the letter of invitation extended by the United States to these 46 countries, which included India, that they could not reopen an agreement between the five the military allies, which were Republic of China, Chiang Kai-shek's China, France, which was actually a government in exile, so therefore they didn't even have their own country at that time. the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. These five had agreed in February 1945, 2 months before the charter was formally opened for discussion, that they would control the world, as General Sharma says, as custodians of the world, the policemen of the world. And to do that, they gave themselves the privilege of saying that if there's any decision to be taken by the United Nations, it will have to be taken only with our agreement. And if we don't agree, that decision can't be taken. And that was the origin of the veto. So the veto was never negotiated in San Francisco. It was brought in, parachuted into the process. And when countries like India and Australia objected in the meeting at San Francisco to the veto, they were told that no, we must sign the treaty because this will symbolize the victory of the Allies and the saving succeeding generations from the scourge of war. Everything else that's in the charter. So you must sign, and in order to enable you to sign, we commit ourselves to reviewing the UN Charter in 10 years' time. And that is contained in Article 109 of the UN Charter, an article which most people don't want to talk about or people have forgotten. But it's part of the treaty, it was negotiated as part of the treaty, and therefore it's nothing new. If you uphold the UN Charter, you have to uphold Article 109 as well. So people like us, who listening to the terrible situation that's happening in the world around us, say that, oh, you know, something has to be done, the UN is in crisis. People like us, some of us, say that yes, there is a crisis, and the charter which created the United Nations actually provides you a provision to review it and to reform it and to provide an effective response to this crisis that you are worried about. So this is the big message that I wanted to convey. There are many things within the charter, we don't have time for all that, but I think it is a fact that the principle of international cooperation on which the entire multilateral experiment for the last 100+ years since 1919 has been going on, that we need to find reasons and ways in which we can cooperate with each other again. And I feel actually not so pessimistic, because the challenges before us and the generation that is sitting in this part of the room, your challenges, the challenges of your smartphones, your digital future, your computer technologies, now those challenges have focused the mind of countries. And I was very happy in August this year when countries in the United Nations unanimously agreed to adopt the first legal convention against cybercrime. So, you know, while we talk of the world that we read about in the newspapers or that the anchors of our television programs project, there is the world in which we live in, which is in your pockets, your smartphones. That world is being addressed through the multilateral system, through agreements to cooperate, through international cooperation to secure our digital future. Now, the digital future will not be the entirety of our lives, obviously not. Everything will depend on what's going on in our minds. And therefore, I think we have to go back to the charter. We have to call for a review of the charter. It's a very simple process. The review requires a 2/3 majority of the General Assembly. There are 193 countries in the UN. That means 129 countries have to agree to call for a conference. And at the same time, out of the 15 members of the Security Council, 9 have to agree to call for a conference. But there is no veto. It's in the provision, there is no veto. So even those 5 policemen of the world have no veto on the proposal to call a conference. And I think that with the kind of death and destruction that's widespread in so many countries that was mentioned earlier today, it will be possible to get 9 out of 15 of the Security Council and 129 out of 193 in the General Assembly to convene a conference. What happens in the conference will depend on the dynamics of negotiation. All of us sit in our families, in our schools, in our universities, in our parliaments, and we negotiate every day. And there's no guarantee what will come out of that negotiation. But at least the idea is to meet. And if you don't meet, then we are in the scenario which was projected by the first speaker today of the might is right and death and destruction will prevail. That is the the counter, if I may
से
say
बंद
so,
होगा ना,
what I
यहाँ पे
said
दिखाएगा
to that
BS
scenario, the
T1
counter
और BS
using
फिर
the
तो बैटरी
dialogue
निकालेगा,
and
जैसे ऑन करेगा
negotiation
तो भाई
to
स्टार्ट
find a
होगा
way forward.
ठीक एकदम बैटरी बंद हो जाएगी
Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. I just got a follow-up question on this. You see, for last 2 decades or so, there have been so many panels and so many studies and all, and notably Action for Peace and Agenda for Peace, and now you have very recently in September, Secretary General Summit for Future. And the report is out, and there is a full chapter on defense, peace and security on that. Now, there are very lofty kind of pledges which have been made there in that. And everything that needs to be done, I think it's been spelled out there. But my question to you is that in practical terms, what changes? They've also talked about, the global governance structure review and recalibration. But in practical terms, what is that we need to do in terms of making UN General Assembly more powerful? And in terms of moderating the behavior of the permanent 5 at the UN Security Council? Particularly, what role can India play? Maybe have your thoughts on this.
The summit of the future took place in September this year. It was attended by the member states of the United Nations, although the idea came out of the Secretary General. It was adopted by the states. So it's an intergovernmental process. It came out with a pact for the future. I was quite disappointed to read the pact for the future because most of it has 58 action points. Most of it are reiterations of all that we negotiated and confirmed to ourselves in 2015. There's nothing new on that. But one thing that was new was that it acknowledged for the first time in an intergovernmental document that development, sustainable development, is the central objective of multilateralism. I was happy to see that because that, in a sense, is a paradigm shift from prioritizing war, peace, security to prioritizing development, peace, and security. And that is something that is important. In terms of what it contained, it had 2 documents annexed to it, the Global Digital Compact and a declaration for future generations. Now, of the 2, the Global Digital Compact is obviously something that is important for the reasons I mentioned previously, and India has a footprint in it because of our size, the way we have used digital technologies for our own transformation in the past 10 years. So ideas which came up in the G20, like the global public digital infrastructure, that finds a place in that. But having said that, the downsides are actually the problem. The downside is, first, there is no time-bound commitment to any of these grand action plans that they have announced. So without a time frame, it is talk as usual, business as usual, and it will just aggravate the feeling that the United Nations is a waste of time. The second problem is that when it comes to reforming the Security Council or empowering the General Assembly, the 2 are interlinked. Because if you remember the veto that I talked about, that is the way of taking decisions on the basis of a completely opaque, subjective basis. Opposed to that in the Charter is the way of taking decisions by consensus or by voting, majority voting. And that is what prevails in the other parts of the United Nations, not in the Security Council. So there's a contradiction in the Charter between how you decide in the Security Council and how you decide in the General Assembly and all other parts of the United Nations. Now, we have to resolve this contradiction, and the only way to resolve it in a treaty like the Charter is through the review. You cannot resolve it sitting in Washington and in Moscow and Beijing and let those people say what they want to say. Because after all, we are a collection in the Charter of sovereign states. The sovereignty of each state is guaranteed by the Charter. So the answer to what you asked me about how to make the UN Security Council more effective and how to empower the General Assembly lies in reviewing the Charter. And in that review of the Charter, some of us have spent almost 2 decades discussing how this Security Council should be reformed, etc., etc. But the key point is equality of decision making. It even affects things like peacekeeping mandates. That if a country like India, which contributes so many soldiers, as we heard from the UN representatives this morning, but cannot sit in the room with these permanent members when they draw up the mandate for deployment. India has no say in where India's troops should go, what kind of troops should be deployed, and more important, what are the lessons that the Indian troops are actually conveying back. It's a two-way process. So what are they conveying back to the UN? There's no way of taking all this in board until we reform the way the decisions are taken. And therefore, empowering the General Assembly actually comes by disempowering the Security Council. And that requires a change to Article 27 of the Charter that constituted itself from, which I talked about, the veto, 27.3, and corresponding amendment to Article 10 of the Charter, and 12 of the Charter. 12, in fact, prohibits the General Assembly from taking up any issue that is on the agenda of the Security Council. So you have to do a charter review. There is no way to avoid this. We have to bite the bullet. Can India do it? India, going by public statements by our Prime Minister and our External Affairs Minister, is willing to do it. But can India do it effectively on the ground through diplomatic networking and negotiation? That is a challenge for India's diplomacy and India itself.
Thank you. I think you wouldn't have been able to get a far clearer understanding about the contradictions and the challenges and the potentialities. So that's been very, very clearly brought out. But I have one question for Jan Sharma. Now we are the second largest contributors to UN peacekeeping, and we actually participate in some of the most risky missions in the world. Now, what are those core competencies in our terms of our war fighting experiences, which we can bring to bear in the new generation peacekeeping, in the kind of conflicts which are staring us in the eyes?
So before we venture into what we can do, we are masters in counterinsurgency. We understand as to how insurgencies are fought and how rebels will behave and how things can be controlled. But before we get into this, it is a question of, as the ambassador rightly pointed out, the question of the mandate. The mandate that is generated by the Security Council invariably ties the hands of the TCCs, the troop contributing countries, in a manner that they can't perform optimally as they want to do so. So till the time if we have to use our competencies, till the time we have a say in the mandate and the quality of troops to be brought in there and take action. If United Nations we are an honorable people. We haven't had strictures brought on Indian armed forces participating in UN missions like many other countries have got. There are countries which have been made, you will not participate in peacekeeping missions. There are countries of this kind. But it has not happened to India because we are honorable people, we respect women, we respect other people, we do not get involved. There are great competencies of this kind that so-called, we say, Sadbhavana models. But the fact of the matter is that there are other contributors and the UN has got no mechanism to legally sort out issues which are happening in the same mission. A same mission will have 5 countries contributing. There are troops of one country which will be having sexual issues being carried out, and UN has no way to charge them, no punish them, no legality, no jail, no follow through, no way to sort it out. And if you have a head of mission there and you bring your competencies there, it's very difficult to pursue issues there. How do we move ahead? It's the question of our competencies, yes, but the competency of the Security Council to visualize the situation and empower the troop contributing countries and the force commanders and the deputy force commanders to come and do the task is more important.
The voice is much better on this. So, you see, one more challenge which is today emerged. There are these non-state actors and people who are involved in civil war. They're using social media today by deepfake, disinformation to target the UN military observers themselves, to tarnish their image and undermine their credibility. Is there anything happening to prevent military observers and UN peacekeeping troops from these kind of, wars?
I'm glad you asked that, General, because probably I was the first Indian ambassador to the UN to face this challenge when General Singha, who was the first commander of the UN mission in the Golan Heights, had in successive two batches of his peacekeepers kidnapped by Al-Nusra, the Al-Qaeda related non-state actors. They call themselves the terrorist group. And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with this challenge? That is the beginning of this. So at that time, there were people like us in the General Assembly who said that the UN must act quickly. We must stop this before it becomes a cancer that affects the whole system. Unfortunately, the big powers, the permanent members, refused to act quickly, act transparently. They supported a backroom deal which let the hostages, peacekeepers taken hostage, come back unharmed, but they gave a lot of money to the non-state actor for that. So, and one of the member states did that. So, it's public knowledge, but nothing happened, and therefore what General Sharma referred to in Mali, the tragedy of Mali took place. But in a way, looking back, we were lucky that we learned from our own experience in our own system. When they asked India to contribute troops for Mali, we said, no, we are not going to contribute troops for Mali because the mandate that you are giving for Mali is a skewed mandate. It is a mandate which will invite trouble. And therefore, we never deployed Indian peacekeepers in Mali, and therefore our peacekeepers didn't die. 149 peacekeepers in Mali have died from terrorist violence. The highest number of such casualties in any Indian, any UN peacekeeping mission today. And maybe, we are lucky that we took the right decision. But the problem continues. And the problem that is added to by what you just mentioned of the use of new technologies in media and communications to target peacekeepers. So what has India done? On the ground in August 2021, India actually piloted a Security Council resolution which called for the obligation of member states to protect UN peacekeepers, and if UN peacekeepers were targeted, then they had to be prosecuted and brought to justice. There was no more impunity for peacekeepers. Now, that was a resolution unanimously adopted in August 2021, and I was quite shocked that we had this unnecessary discussion on what to do with UNIFIL. I mean, there is a UN resolution. If a country which is attacking peacekeepers is a member of the United Nations, it has to face sanctions. It's as simple as that.
Thank you very much. I think we will take 2 or 3 questions, and then I'll request the panelists to give their concluding remarks. Yes, General Rajeshwar.
Thank you, sir. I think is there echo because the mic is up? Can you hear me?
No, continue.
Give this one.
Right. See, I take your point that when you are stating that this is an era of war and not peace, and you pointed out to the Institute, Uppsala Institute for these 32 conflicts. On the other hand, it's clear UN has been failing in recent times, especially as the big 5 are at variance as to what to do with wars, notwithstanding the reforms which are being suggested. So my point is, especially taken from your heading, which is more on the landscape of conflict. So do we need to actually technically redefine war? Otherwise what will happen is, all these conflicts, they are ones which are festering. They never go away in the numbers. They can just, like fluid, move from one place to the other. But I mean, in that way, if you look at it, if you don't distinguish war from conflicts, then you have a situation that whatever be the mandate given to the UN, at any time it is going to be, a punching bag to be said that UN is ineffective. So when I take your, heading, you'll always have a challenge, even if it is a multilateral decision, and even if the best to their ability the peacekeepers work, if you don't distinguish between the two, you will never be able to actually resolve anything. Your comments?
Yeah, let's have one or two more questions if there are any. Yes, sir, I'll come to you. Yes. No, let's start from the back. No, from you.
Okay.
Yeah. Just give the mic. Please identify yourself.
I'm Professor Dr. D.K. Pandey from Center for Air Studies. My question is rather for both of you. We both have agreed that there is a lot of imbalanced complexities which has come. Reason? United Nations have become totally irrelevant due to certain biases. How to address these biases? This should be the biggest challenge in place of actually looking for the peace or sovereignty, so-called, because we are not reaching to any place. As far as situation is concerned, where United Nations teams are working for peace keeping, it happened in Gaza. WA were misused for various reasons. So why situation is to this state where countries are saying United Nations are not required? That is, I think, a more serious issue. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
I just have one question, not a question, but I want to clarify my own mind. I heard the speech of Netanyahu in the General Assembly recently, I think a month back or something. Now, throughout that his speech, he just said that this Security Council is bogus, and he disowned it. There was no outrage amongst the members, or later on, I didn't at least see in any of the newspapers or commentaries about this Netanyahu's speech. There is another aspect of it of mandate. When people say that why is that Hamas not the enmity between the Israelis and the Hamas leaders? He says that people say that Hamas leader is one thing and Hamas public, how do you differentiate between them? Israelis' answer to that is they have voted for Hamas without any. The people of Gaza have voted for Hamas during the elections as their own leader. They have given him the mandate to do whatever he wants to do. So, to me, it is not only the Hamas leaders, but also the people of Gaza are complicit in what is happening in that area. So, your comments on this?
Yes, sir. Your thought is
I don't have a question. I have a request for the chair. We have a sizable proportion of children, boys and girls. May I request you to ask them what they have understood, and if you can ask a question.
Examination.
Yes. So children, would you like to just give your remarks on the discussion, what you imbibed out of it?
Sir, I understood a lot, but I have a question. Sir, you have said that it is an era of war and not peace. So, sir, is there any permanent solution to the war?
Very basic question. Any other
Any girl?
Any student, girl student, any questions? Yes.
So, as one of you mentioned about non-state actors leading to wars, so what actually do you mean by that? How they lead it? Can you define it in a way?
Okay, thank you. I think we will be running short of time. So I request Jan Sharma to tell us about this definition of war and conflict, particularly when UN has not even been able to define what terrorism is and what terror is all about. So is it a sort of a worthwhile exercise with some real tangible outcomes, or it will just keep going beating about the bush?
So I wrote a piece on redefining war recently, this year. I think in India we need to little wake up. We lap up every terminology that the Americans throw up in no time, absorb it, make it our own and write books on it. In 2015 there was no word called grey zone. 2015 the first word grey zone came up and we lapped it up, and everybody who doesn't talk the word grey zone is illiterate in uniform fraternity. Till 2016 there was no terminology called multi-domain warfare. We not fighting multi-domain warfare previously. We now everybody has to lap up multi-domain warfare and speak about it. Then we have everybody who comes on a mic speaks about nature and character of war. Nature doesn't change, nature is enduring, character changes because of technological interface. You go back to he died in 1815 if I'm not wrong, Clausewitz. Let him die in peace, yeah. Why? What difference does it make about nature and character of war if it changes and doesn't change? You fight your own wars, yeah. Whether nature is changing or character is changing, how does it make a difference to us? The fact is, nature, the chair rightly said, nature, I would argue incessantly on nature changing. There is no stagnation of nature. But you see any American on a YouTube, he says nature doesn't change, character changes. Most of us CDS and CDS may have unit there, but most of the other people who come there, they say every speech given is nature doesn't change, character changes. We are stuck into a rote. We need to define war. I would say, if some country today wakes up and says India's foreign exchange reserves are not useful and they are locked wherever they are in European Union or in US, that foreign exchange reserves of India belong to the people of India, not to the government of India, and they are utilized for the people of India. It's war. It is more important a war than a war which is being fought on the line of control or line of actual control. That's war. If somebody coerces a nation by firing missiles over it, in and out, like Taiwan is done, is it not war? If somebody occupies a portion of my territory and says you can't patrol it, it's war. I say it is war. You say no, it's not a war, it is disengagement, disatheist, all terminologies that are available will be used there. But your entire armies got deployed on borders. Is it not war? Yes, sir. You are DG clause till yesterday, or before yesterday. We need to redefine war. War is not even coercion is war. If China says all Lotte malls and all Nike stores and all Adidas stores and all blocked in China because they are criticizing Xinjiang, well, it's war. If China tells us Rockstar movie cannot be displayed in India because Rockstar movie showed a Free Tibet flag, and we change the movie and we block the flag, that's war. Somebody is coercing us from behind here. It's war. Define war again. War is not this issue. I think I'll just take one or two issues. Otherwise, so
that you asked in Punjabi, so the language.
That's because Dogri is a politer form of Punjabi. So, UN RWA issue, I think the ambassador can handle it better. I just want to say why we have not displayed, and I would love to hear the ambassador from this one, on responsibility to protect. there is a logic of responsibility to protect. जब मेरा मूड बना तो मैंने जाके कोसोवो में, सर्बिया में, I sorted the country out without a US mandate by saying this is responsibility to protect against massacres. That means there is no ultimate absolute sovereignty of a nation. If somebody sitting there without a resolution decides it is my responsibility to protect, I'll do it. But it is not my responsibility to protect the Palestinians which are dying in Gaza. I detest what happened on 7th of October, but you can't take disproportionate response also. So the fact of the matter is, where did the responsibility to protect go when Rwanda was involved? But it was involved when Serbians were involved. So this is, these are issues which are very significant because United Nations says so. These issues matter here. And I'd say non-state actors, and end by saying, when we talk non-state actors, we talk every known terrorist organization, insurgent organization. I'd say we non-state actor is Greenpeace, Amnesty International. These are non-state actors. Citibank, Bank of America, they are non-state actors. Some of these banks are richer than most of the GDPs of the country. They can squeeze a nation out of. So there are civil non-state actors who are as tough and as difficult as the non-state actor which are uncivil kinds. So non-state actors are everything which is non-state.
So he's played all over the field and left to you to now convert a penalty corner into a throw.
No, I just like to start off with Rajesh, but yes, there is taking into account what has been said in response, multi-dimensional, that is where this is going towards. What is included in multi-dimensional is, has been evident over discussion and agreement. Just for those who follow this in multilateral context, it took the United Nations from 1945 till 1974, that period of time, to define aggression. And then the General Assembly adopted a definition of aggression in a resolution, sent it to the Security Council and said from now on, you follow this criteria of aggression when you take your Chapter 7 or Chapter 6. The Security Council put it in the dustbin. We have never seen reversals at all. So, is it worth defining? Is it worth putting words on paper? And as Sharma says, actually you have to respond to what you feel and see yourself, and then you justify to all these theories and terminologies later on. And in that context, probably responsibility to protect. I was, involved in transferring the files of the UN War Crimes Commission. Most people in India don't even know it existed, but India was one of the 17 countries with the UN War Crimes Commission, which collected the information on the crimes of the Second World War. It all got transferred to the US Holocaust Museum. So when that took place, somebody told me that India is one country that has actually acted and shown how responsibility to protect should be done, and that was 1971 Bangladesh. You went in, you did what you had to do, and then you went out and left the people there to deal with the situation as it was fair. So that probably is now UNRWA. Actually, for 48 hours there was a lot of commotion reflecting exactly what you all have said about UNRWA. And then the United States realized that things have become very serious because they are the biggest financial donor to UNRWA. So the United States then got the Security Council to issue a document upholding UNRWA. So there's nothing wrong with UNRWA. What was wrong was the oversight of how UNRWA recruited people, how those people functioned, didn't function. Out of the 19 names, 9 have been terminated from their contract with UNRWA. But that didn't allow the entire work of UNRWA to be called into question, which is what Israel wanted to do. And therefore, the reference you made of Netanyahu and the map and everything, I think that's important for us to see because, as I said right at the beginning, it's our soldiers who liberated that area, isn't it? I mean, Jodhpur, Nalsas, and Haifa. So we have an equal legitimacy and stake in saying what is happening in this region is something in which we are interested in, and our views also have to play a role. And below, Nafkez Sarna is talking about Crimson Flood, but his book on Herod's Gate and Baba Farid, and that is part of Jerusalem. So we are enmeshed with this region. So I think that the time has come that we need to actually assert our interests and our perspectives and our experience and our sacrifices more. We have not done it as a country. There was one British Prime Minister, actually was from Wales, and he made the mistake of writing in his memoirs that India should actually take over the role of the United Kingdom in the region from West Asia to Bombay. And that was Lloyd George. But Lloyd George was removed very quickly and Churchill and all came back. So that is the strategic space which we need to actually look at. And I hope that in Bursa we can see that.
Thank you, Ambassador Mukherjee. I think to conclude, I would just say that today India has 1.4 billion people, fifth largest economy, poised to be the third largest economy, a nuclear weapon power, and the third largest armed forces in the world. And it is high time now we should put our act together and shape the agenda at the United Nations. Not only what is going on, but the conflicts of the future and the challenges of the future. But is there a debate at the policy and doctrinal level which is taking place in this country or not, is a moot point. And for the students, young students who are going to be our future leaders, I would just give 3 quotes to conclude this discussion. Thucydides has said, "The strong do what they will, and the weak suffer what they must." Right? One. Second thing, Paulo Coelho, my favorite author, he said, "Love thy neighbor but never sell your soul." And third is, President Roosevelt said, you say, "Speak softly, but carry a long stick and you will go far." These are the mantras for India. Today, we cannot come under the tutelage of another country or group of countries. We have arrived on our own, and we have to take a leadership role for the betterment of the humanity and address those universal issues. And UN is one international organization where we have to make an impact. So with this, all it remains for me is to thank my co-panelists and a very interesting discussion that we had. And please join me in giving a big applause.
Thank you so much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to a special screening of The Greatest War Ever Won, 1971, Stories from the Battlefield, in this hall only. Please do the live screening. May we have the live screening, please? I'll request all of you to move to multipurpose hall for the live screening of the movie. There is some technical issues here. I'm sorry. Kindly reassemble by 14:10. We will be having another session which starts at 14:20. Thank you.
ऑनलाइन है वैसा कैसा
कहाँ
उसी भी हो जाएगा यार
हैं?
उसी भी हो जाएगा।
अरे वो कर नहीं पा रहे ना उसमें। हाँ लाइव स्ट्रीमिंग देखिए आपको फायदा नहीं बैठने आप मेरे को कॉल कर देना मैं करता हूँ कॉल हाँ जो भी हो वो कुछ इंटरनेट शेयरिंग टर्न ऑन
पुरानी जो इवेंट्स जितनी भेजी ना जितनी में उन्होंने वो कर दिया
वो कहाँ है? इसका कहाँ है? ऊपर वाले का कहाँ है? ऊपर वाले का कहाँ है?
ऊपर वाले का कौन सा वो
हाँ प्रोग्राम कहाँ है?
प्रोग्राम ये कौन सा प्रोग्राम
हम अपनी पेज में लाइव भाई ये पहले क्यों नहीं साइन इन करके रखा हुआ था? ये भी सबके सामने किसने कर रहे थे तुम?
क्या
साइन इन
भाई मेरा पीसी नहीं है ना।
अरे तो पहले बताना था ना।
मैंने तो देखो आपको बाहर से कर रखा था।
किसी में भी साइन अरे एक सेकंड आपको करना क्या है?
यूट्यूब चलाना है।
अरे तो यूट्यूब
वो तो गेस्ट मोड में भी है।
हाँ और क्या इतना बड़ा क्या इशू है?
यूएसआई लिखा हुआ है।
अरे यार ये लो इसी को खोलो किसी यूट्यूब इस पे सर अभी यहाँ पे कितने बजे?
So what we ended up doing is this. We have these officers who actually on the board what actually happened. And this is narrated by Star Castle Veterans and each episode is a classic. It also included some material of intelligence diplomats.
ये क्या ड्रामा है यार?
भाई ये इंटरनेट ड्रामा नहीं देखा।
बंदा उसको बुलाओ यार बंदा भेजो अपना यार।
क्या इशू क्या है? वीडियो नहीं चल रहा है?
सर प्रोजेक्टर ऑफ है।
ये मॉर्निंग में बोला था इनको ऑन करने के लिए तब से इन्होंने किया नहीं।
एक तो आपने 5 माइक का बोला था, एक माइक आपका चल नहीं रहा है।
सारे लोग नीचे चले गए, अब नीचे फुल है। वो बैठेंगे
These
कहाँ
are their stories from the battlefield. And when we mirrored the events of the day on day, what emerged was a grandmaster playing chess. And the sheer brilliance of it convinced us that
आएंगे तब ना
क्योंकि नीचे वाला हॉल भरा हुआ है वापस ऊपर उनको बोला जाएगा।
this is our we added elements to contextualize the events leading up to the war and extent of what happened. I must emphasize in a very tiny sliver of an
पहली बात तो अभी होता वो माइक का क्या करेगा वो खराब
around
नहीं
the
है।
world.
अब ऐसे ही can't explain
This
the speakers who keep
episode
changing their mind.
has been edited from around 25 hours of recording.
और ये
Let's start.
वो उस पे वो देखो वो
The greatest tribute
टिम और
that has been paid to India and the liberation war of Bangladesh is by Michael Walzer in his seminal book,
आप ये
Just
माइक का देखो
Another
पहले।
Wars. And he goes on to say that it is 20th century's most outstanding
दो पीस पर है
example
ना?
of
आप एक
humanitarian.
काम करो अभी तो हमारे यहाँ पे कोई काम है नहीं।
He also says that the world was aware of it,
मोनिका कहाँ गई?
the world chose to neglect it. India had no option but to go in and they did, and they did an outstanding job.
This, ladies and gentlemen, let's just go back a little bit.
हमारे जरा पास है।
They did an outstanding job.
शंकर सर ये बताओ आप
The root
ये
cause
करो
of the
ना।
conflict in Bangladesh lies in
आवाज ही उससे क्लियर नहीं आती। यहाँ से बड़ा है तो हो रही थी बहुत ज़्यादा।
culture, economics by the fellow
सर
citizens
आप
of
इनको
West
सुना भी?
Pakistan.
ये माइक देखो।
1971,
छोड़ना
a
मत
nation
माइक।
united by religion was divided
अरे एक माइक
by
खराब है ना, वो
language,
डीजे को अपना माइक देना पड़ा था
culture, and
डीजे को।
politics. These Pakistanis revolted, and the professional army took sides and supported the interests of the Pakistan People's Party, which has a really good look, which lost the election.
अभी सर सब नीचे कर दिया था और
सेंटर में राइट वाला देखिए।
I think वो right वाला है। According to an estimate by Justice Subhan,
हाँ ये वाला नहीं।
after 23rd of March and December, at least 200,000 women were raped by Pakistani soldiers. This is a picture of Malika Khan in Dhaka, and I met her. She was the head of Bangladesh Rights Association, and she left as in December 71. Started with in an interview with The Guardian, she says, women were completely naked, abandoned in bunkers, tortured by soldiers, many very friendly.
इंस्टाग्राम अपलोड करके किसको भेज रही है?
This ladies and gentlemen is a picture of Dr. He was a late And he worked in Bangladesh in 1972 under the WHO. And I quote him, the Pakistan infantry would go in and begin to segregate the women, and then they would be put into a compound and made available to troops. He interviewed Pakistani officers who prisoners of war in Kumilla, and the response was shocking. What was the fuss about? They said it was war, and we had under the kind of instructions we learned to impregnate as many Bengali women as possible. To help integrate these rape victims back into society, we would call them, give them an honorific called Viranganas, which means war heroines.